Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Zachary Walton inherited his late uncle's remote lakeside cabin, he expected peace and nostalgia, not a full-blown war with a power-hungry HOA president. But when trespassers showed up with grills and clipboards, he knew one thing for sure. This was no ordinary summer. The gravel crunched under the tires as I eased the truck through the tree-lined path. It had been over 20 years since I last drove down this old logging road, but muscle memory guided the wheel like I'd never left. The pine trees loomed tall on either side, their scent thick and sharp in the mountain air. At the curve near the stream, I slowed down just to take it in, the glint of water, the rustle of wind, and the silence you couldn't buy in the city. And then I saw it. The cabin stood at the edge of the lake, just as I remembered it. Wooden walls weathered to silver, chimney slightly tilted, the old aluminum boat turned upside down by the dock like it had always been waiting. Except now, it was mine. Officially, legally, by blood and by will. Uncle Roy had left it to me in full, along with the surrounding 6 acres and the private shoreline. No HOA, no neighbors within shouting distance. Just my family and the ghosts of childhood summers. Kids. Phones away. This is nature, I said as I killed the engine. My daughter groaned. My son pretended not to hear. My wife smiled, already rolling down her window to breathe in the clean air. She squeezed my arm, her way of saying she knew what this place meant to me. We spent the first day clearing out the cabin. It hadn't seen a human in 2 years, maybe more, but the bones were solid. Dust layered thick on every surface, but I found the old trapdoor under the rug still open with that satisfying creak. The basement was dry, surprisingly so. I installed a new lock on the front and back doors, then swapped out the hinges with heavy-duty security ones I brought in a duffel. I wasn't here to play house. I was here to make sure no one ever took it from us. At night, we ate chili out of a pot on the porch and watched the moon ripple on the water. I told my son about the time Uncle Roy tricked a raccoon into stealing a beer can. My daughter called bullshit but laughed. That sound, my kids laughing out here, was worth every dime I'd poured into this place. The next morning, I started on the cameras. 2 solar-powered motion sensors by the dock, another over the gatepost where the old wooden sign used to be. I replaced the Walton property no trespassing sign with a newer one made of steel, buried a reinforced chain across the dirt road leading to the cabin. We weren't expecting trouble, but that's exactly when it tends to show up. By the 3rd day, we'd slipped into a rhythm. The kids took the canoe out after breakfast. My wife read on the deck, and I kept myself busy reinforcing the shed and recharging the generator. I was covered in sweat, sawdust, and a mild sunburn, and loving every second of it. That evening, just before sunset, I noticed a vehicle creeping up the hill near the edge of our tree line. Silver SUV, tinted windows. It stopped for a moment, then turned and slowly rolled back down. No one got out. I didn't say anything to the family, maybe a lost hiker, maybe someone curious, but I didn't like it. So, that night, I added 2 more trail cams and ran a cable alert system along the lower path, just in case. I knew the look of bad intentions. I'd seen it in war zones and back alleys in places the average American couldn't find on a map. And even though I was in the middle of nowhere, drinking beer on a porch swing, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching. Or worse, planning. The first couple arrived just after noon. I was trimming back some overgrowth along the edge of the dock when I saw them. 2 adults in matching sun hats and reflective sunglasses, strolling down the path like they were heading to a resort they'd paid for. They weren't sneaking either. Bold, relaxed. The woman even waved at me as they got closer. "Afternoon," the man called out, adjusting the strap on his oversized cooler. "Beautiful day for a swim, huh?" I straightened up, wiped the sweat off my brow, and glanced around. No other cars, just them. "You folks lost?" I asked, already knowing the answer I wasn't going to like. The woman laughed like I'd told a joke. "Oh no, not at all. Nora said the lake cabin was finally available again. She told us it was first come, first served this weekend. We figured we'd beat the crowd." I stared at her for a second. "Nora?" "The HOA president," the man chimed in. "Said you were one of the new folks. Figured you wouldn't mind us using the water access. She said it's technically shared recreational space." I almost laughed, but it came out closer to a grunt. "Yeah, no. This is private property. I own the cabin, the dock, and that shoreline." I pointed with my multi-tool. "You're trespassing. I'm gonna need you to turn around." The woman's smile faltered, but she said, I don't care what she said. I have the deed, and it says this land is mine. Not shared, not open, not leased. Mine. They didn't argue much after that, though the guy made a passive-aggressive comment about how some people just aren't very neighborly anymore. I let it slide. I was more focused on the part where someone named Nora, whom I hadn't met, was apparently giving out invitations to my lake. 2 days later, I was chopping firewood when a line of cars started pulling up near the gated entrance. Not one, not two, 4. One of them even had a kayak strapped to the roof. I dropped the axe, heart rate already up. By the time I reached the front trail, I found a full-blown beach crew gathering. Folding chairs, flip-flops, Bluetooth speakers, the whole suburban picnic setup, and none of them looked even remotely surprised to see me. "We'll just set up over there by the trees," a teenage girl chirped. "No, you won't," I said, stepping between them and the gate. "This is not a park. This is private land." A tall guy with a clipboard raised an eyebrow. But Nora's email said this cabin was unoccupied and cleared for HOA lake usage. She even attached a PDF of the lake access policy. I don't give a damn what her email said. The land this cabin sits on has been in my family for decades, and I have the paperwork to prove it. You're all trespassing. This is your notice. The group looked at each other, confused and visibly irritated. One woman muttered something about elitists with shoreline property. Another guy huffed, "It's just water, man." "You don't own the lake." "Actually," I said, keeping my voice calm, "I own this stretch of access to it, which means I control who sets foot on it." They weren't happy, but they left, complaining as they packed up their chairs and beers. One guy deliberately dropped a soda can in the grass and made eye contact while he did it. I picked it up after they left. Trash was easy to deal with. Liars in positions of authority? Not so much. That night, I double-checked the boundary lines on my property survey. I printed out fresh copies and laminated them. I reviewed the plat maps, the deed, even the county filings. Everything was in order. The next morning, I ran into a man fishing off his kayak near the shore. I walked down the dock and asked if he needed help. He waved. "Just enjoying the public access. Nora says this shoreline's for everyone in Maple Ridge." "Does Nora own a boat?" I asked. He blinked. "No." "Then she has no business claiming mine." He didn't argue, just paddled off. But that name was starting to grind on my nerves like sand in a gear. Later that afternoon, I flagged down an older man in a wide-brimmed hat rowing toward my dock. His boat was loaded with supplies. I recognized him from across the lake, one of the few year-rounders in these parts. "Name's Bart," he said as he docked. "Heard about the visitors." "Let me guess. Nora sent them." Bart spat into the water. "She's been acting like she owns every drop of this lake since they turned the south end into a development and formed that HOA. Claims they manage recreational access now." "Do they?" "Hell no. Most of this lake is private parcel. But she's been telling newcomers otherwise. Calls it a community rewilding effort. Whatever the hell that means." I offered him a beer, and he took it. We sat in silence for a while, watching the sun drop low over the treetops. I didn't say anything, but I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. It was only a matter of time before she showed up herself. I was cleaning the gutters when I heard tires crunching gravel in that entitled kind of way, slow enough to suggest ownership, confident enough to be infuriating. I peered down from the ladder and saw the glossy black SUV crawl up to the front gate. It didn't stop like a normal visitor would. It rolled straight up my drive and parked with the grace of a hearse at a funeral. The door opened, and out stepped a woman who looked like she practiced her condescension in the mirror each morning. Late 50s, angular bob haircut, crisp white blouse tucked into pressed khakis, oversized sunglasses like she was scouting locations for a retirement brochure. Behind her trailed 2 men with clipboards. HOA lapdogs, I assumed. They didn't say a word, just stood like background props while the Queen made her entrance. "Mr. Walton," she called, striding toward the porch like I'd summoned her. "That depends," I said, coming down the ladder. "Are you here to trespass, threaten, or just lie about property lines?" She blinked behind her glasses and offered a tight smile. "I'm Nora Page, president of the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. I'm here to clarify some misunderstandings." "You've been sending strangers onto my land. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a felony." Nora waved her hand like she was shooing a fly. "The community has enjoyed informal access to this lakefront for years. You're new, so I understand your confusion, but our bylaws clearly state that all bordering shoreline is considered shared use space. She pulled out a stapled packet from her leather folder and held it out like gospel. Per Section 7.3 of the Maple Ridge HOA Charter, recreational lakefront access may not be obstructed by adjacent landowners without pre-approved scheduling through the association board. I didn't even take it from her. I just laughed. Lady, this property was deeded to me by my uncle. It predates your HOA by at least 3 decades. Your little charter means jack on private land that isn't under your jurisdiction. You're mistaken, she snapped, dropping the charm. We've had several arrangements with previous owners. My uncle didn't arrange anything. He hated HOAs, used to call them small-town tyrannies in beige slacks. That got a twitch from one of the clipboard goons. Nora straightened her shoulders. If you continue to block access, you will be subject to fines up to $25,000, depending on duration of non-compliance. I'm trying to resolve this civilly, Mr. Walton. So am I said, turning to open my cabin door. And civilly speaking, if I see one more trespasser out here, I'll have them arrested. I've got cameras, documents, timestamps, and a lawyer who actually passed the bar exam, unlike whoever ghost wrote that crap you're waving around. You're making this very difficult, she hissed, and you're way out of your depth. She stormed off without another word, her entourage trailing like confused mall cops. As they reached the SUV, I noticed her looking back at the dock with this flicker in her expression, like she was already imagining it filled with HOA flags and potluck tables. I made a mental note to reinforce the lock on the boathouse. Saturday started off calm, too calm in hindsight. My wife had taken the kids into town for ice cream and groceries, and I stayed behind to finish patching up the shed's roof. It was one of those rare, crisp mornings where the lake looked like glass, and the air didn't buzz with insects or human nonsense. I should have known that kind of peace wouldn't last. Around noon, I took a break and checked the live feed from one of my perimeter cams, more out of habit than concern. That's when I saw it. 2 men in gray polos and utility belts were standing at my front gate, talking into walkie-talkies. One of them had a bolt cutter slung casually over his shoulder like a fishing pole. Behind them, a line of SUVs was slowly pulling up. 8, maybe 10 people were unloading coolers, towels, even a damn folding gazebo. They looked like a wedding party that got lost and decided to set up camp anyway. I grabbed my keys and bolted to the truck, still watching the feed as the bolt cutters went to work. By the time I got back, 23 minutes later, give or take, they were in full swing. The chain was gone. The gate swung open like it had never known a lock. Strangers dotted my property like ants on a picnic blanket. Kids were running around the yard with floaties. Someone had fired up a portable grill next to my tool shed. Music was playing, something awful and cheerful. I could smell hot dogs and entitlement from halfway down the hill. And right in the middle of it all, strung up between 2 poles on my deck, was a homemade banner that read, "Welcome HOA members, Summer Kickoff BBQ." I parked crooked and hard, stepped out, and took exactly 3 seconds of video on my phone before calling the cops. I didn't shout, didn't threaten, just started filming. That, of course, is when Nora appeared. She was wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat and a red HOA polo, holding a clipboard like it was a scepter. She spotted me and gave a little wave, like we were about to discuss catering logistics. "Oh, good. You're back. I was hoping to speak with you." "You're trespassing," I said flatly. "Every last one of you. Leave. Now." Her smile thinned. "Mr. Walton, this is an official HOA-sanctioned gathering. Given your continued resistance to integration, we assume the property was inactive for community use. You're not even on the HOA roster, because I don't belong to it. Never have. Never will." Behind her, a guy in cargo shorts was dragging one of my Adirondack chairs down to the water. Another man was smoking a cigar on my porch swing. A kid was standing ankle-deep in the garden I'd just replanted. "I've got you on video cutting locks, entering private property, using personal assets, and endangering minors on terrain that isn't yours," I said. "Police are en route." Nora's face flushed, but she held her ground. We were acting in good faith on behalf of the community. The HOA has a long-standing expectation of shoreline access. Expectation isn't ownership. That finally silenced her for about 10 seconds. Then she huffed, turned to the crowd, and yelled, "Everyone, please remain calm and continue enjoying yourselves. This is just a misunderstanding." I didn't say another word, just kept recording. The smarter ones started packing up. A few muttered apologies. One guy flipped me off while wrapping up a kiddie pool. When the first cruiser pulled in, sirens off but lights flashing, it was like someone hit the eject button on the party. The mood flipped from festive to feral in seconds. 2 squad cars pulled in just as someone was trying to light a second grill near my tool shed. The crowd froze in that telltale American way, equal parts guilt and defiance, like kids caught smoking behind the school gym. I lowered my phone and walked toward the first officer stepping out. "Afternoon," I said, offering a calm nod. "You're going to want to talk to me first." Before I could say another word, Nora was already marching across the lawn, clipboard in hand, voice raised like she was running a town hall meeting. "Officer, I'm so glad you came. We have a situation. This man has been impersonating the rightful steward of this property." I blinked. "I'm sorry." "What?" She pointed at me like I'd stolen her purse. "He broke into this house weeks ago and has been illegally occupying it. The property was placed under provisional community trust years ago. I have documentation showing that the previous owner, one Roy Walton, entered into a verbal agreement with the Maple Ridge HOA to allow summer access." The younger of the 2 officers glanced between us, visibly confused. "Ma'am, this is a criminal trespass call. Who made the complaint?" "I did," I said. "Name's Zachary Walton. I own this cabin. I inherited it from my Uncle Roy. I have the deed, the probate documents, and a full plat map in my truck. These people broke in, cut my gate, and are hosting a barbecue on private property." Nora cut in. "He's fabricating all of this. The community has used this land for years without issue. We believed the property was abandoned or donated. He refused to engage with the HOA and has created an unsafe environment." One of the officers raised an eyebrow. "So, you admit to entering the property without permission and hosting an event here?" I assumed it was authorized. She snapped. "Authorized by whom?" "By precedent," she said, like she was quoting scripture. I exhaled slowly. "I have video of the lock being cut, of guests entering, of damage to my garden and deck. Want to see it?" That got their attention. I pulled out my phone, opened the app linked to my security system, and played a 30-second clip showing Nora's 2 hired goons cutting the chain and waving people through like theme park attendants. The older officer muttered, "Well, damn." The younger one took a notepad out. "All right, sir, we're going to need to take statements. Ma'am, we'll need you and your guests to vacate immediately." Nora's face twisted. "This is a mistake. You'll be hearing from our legal team." "You bet I will," I said. "And you'll be hearing from mine." Over the next 15 minutes, the officers cleared the area. Some of the partygoers tried to argue. One woman insisted she had a lake pass, whatever the hell that meant. A teenager whined that they hadn't even gotten to eat yet. One guy tried to take a swing at my camera post on the way out, but the officers stepped in fast. Once the crowd had thinned, I gave a full statement, handed over copies of my deed and the footage, and made it very clear that I wanted a formal report filed. The officers assured me they'd initiate a criminal trespass investigation and flag Nora and her associates for potential property damage and unauthorized entry. She didn't speak to me again. Just stood there next to her SUV, arms folded, jaw clenched, eyes burning holes through my siding. The party was over, but the war, I knew, was just getting started. I didn't waste time licking my wounds. The minute the cops were gone and the last of Nora's entitled guests disappeared down the road, I opened my laptop and started assembling every piece of evidence I had. Video files, screenshots, the deed, the will, the camera logs, even timestamps from the gate sensor. I uploaded everything to a secure drive and emailed my attorney with the subject line, "It's war." Within an hour, she called me back. Gina Morris, former JAG lawyer turned real estate pitbull. I'd worked with her once before on a commercial zoning dispute and kept her number saved under "in case of idiots." She didn't disappoint. They broke your lock, entered your house, used your private property for a sanctioned event, and now they're claiming you don't own it, she said, practically humming with glee. "Oh, this is going to be fun." I gave her the whole rundown. She asked sharp questions, took notes, and told me to start documenting everything, new damage, conversations, any further contact. "If they so much as send you another flyer," she said, "I want a scan of it." And then I called Lucas. Lucas Hayes was a friend of mine from college who now worked as an investigative journalist for a regional media site. Not the Times, but enough reach to get attention, and more than enough to embarrass the hell out of a suburban HOA. He was immediately interested. "Let me get this straight," he said, chuckling into the phone. "They threw a barbecue at your private lake cabin after breaking in." "Yep." "And the HOA president claimed you're squatting in your own inherited home?" "Correct." "Jesus Christ. I'll drive up tomorrow." While he prepped the story, Gina filed a preliminary cease and desist against the HOA for trespassing, harassment, and property damage. We also submitted a formal complaint to the county sheriff's office, citing illegal occupation and forced entry. She requested they open a file against Nora and her 2 security contractors, who, as it turned out, weren't licensed for any kind of enforcement activity. By Sunday evening, I'd installed 2 more cameras, reinforced the generator shed, and mounted a motion light above the porch. I wasn't scared, I was pissed, and then the pushback started. Monday morning, I stepped outside to find one of my cameras had been smashed, not just turned around, shattered. The cable from the generator had been sliced clean through, and someone had driven over the private property sign at the road entrance. They didn't leave a note. They didn't need to. A few hours later, an envelope appeared in the mailbox. No stamp. Just a single sheet inside. Official notice of HOA sanctions, $5,000 per day for willful obstruction of community recreation. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my coffee. It was printed on Maple Ridge HOA letterhead, complete with a forged signature from someone named Vice Chair of Community Access Enforcement. Cute. I scanned it, emailed it to Gina, then sat down and waited. Lucas's article went live the next morning. Lake House hostile takeover, how one HOA tried to claim a veteran's cabin. It wasn't just well written, it was nuclear. Full timeline, photos of the party, screenshots from the cameras, legal documents, and quotes from Gina about the illegality of HOA overreach. Lucas even interviewed Bart, who gladly told him Nora had been acting like the queen of the lake ever since someone let her read a rulebook. By lunchtime, my inbox was flooded. Messages of support from neighbors I didn't even know. A few from other cabin owners with similar horror stories. One email just said, "Thank you for fighting back. We all needed this." That afternoon, I saw Nora's SUV roll past the gate again. She didn't stop, just slowed down enough to glare up at the camera mounted above the trail. I smiled and waved. By the end of the week, Gina had everything filed. She wasn't just going after them for trespassing. We were stacking charges like a buffet plate. Unlawful entry, vandalism, harassment, fraudulent documents, and that last one? That was the sweet spot. She'd had a handwriting analyst review the signature on the fake community access form they'd mailed me. Not only was it forged, but the supposed signatory didn't even exist in any HOA records. Someone had literally made up a vice chair just to sound official. Gina was practically salivating. "You give me a week in court and I'll turn this HOA into compost." Meanwhile, Nora and her people didn't take the hint. It started with flyers, printed leaflets left on my gate, stapled to trees along the road. Stuff like, "One man shouldn't block access for hundreds," and "Protect community traditions, reclaim the lake." Then came the Facebook posts. Someone had started a public group called Save Maple Shoreline, where they reposted screenshots from the HOA charter, irrelevant. Old blurry satellite images of the lake, also irrelevant, and out-of-context quotes from Lucas's article, twisted, to make it sound like I was trying to privatize a historically shared area. Then came the bricks. Not through a window, yet, but 2 showed up on my porch one morning. One had the word thief painted on it, the other, "We see you." My wife was rattled. We'd kept the kids away since the first break-in, but even she was starting to question if this was worth it. I told her calmly that we weren't backing down, and that I'd already bought the motion-triggered floodlights and a wireless panic alarm. The sheriff's office agreed to increase patrols near the property. I filed a police report for the threats. Gina had already subpoenaed HOA internal emails and demanded a forensic audit of their records. And then came the cherry on top. Nora filed her own lawsuit, a civil claim, against me, for defamation, obstruction of community access, and reputational harm to the Maple Ridge Homeowners Association. She demanded I take down the article, retract the accusations, and pay $150,000 in damages. When Gina saw the paperwork, she didn't even blink. "This is good. Means they're panicking." I asked, "Should we counter?" She grinned. "Already filed." And I added a personal claim against Nora for malicious prosecution. By now, the HOA's little fantasy about recreational entitlement had turned into a full-blown legal brawl, but they weren't prepared for someone like me to fight back. I'd lost one home as a kid. I wasn't about to let anyone take this one without crawling through fire. The courtroom smelled like wood polish and bad coffee. I sat beside Gina at the plaintiff's table, wearing my best pair of slacks and a collared shirt that still somehow made me feel underdressed. Across the aisle, Nora looked like she was auditioning for a Real Housewives spin-off. White blazer, pearls, smug composure pasted on like stage makeup. Her attorney, some guy named Lyle Withers, had the oily confidence of someone who bills by the minute and loses by the hour. Judge Redmond, gray-haired and humorless, opened proceedings with a warning. This court does not look kindly upon manufactured conflicts over property boundaries. If you're wasting our time, you will regret it. I liked him immediately. Gina opened strong. She walked the court through the timeline: inheritance, restoration, intrusion, escalation, exhibits A through L, video clips, maps, notarized documents, the camera footage of the lock cutting. She played a recording of Nora at the barbecue, talking about assuming community use rights. Nora's lawyer objected, citing informal precedent. The judge leaned forward. "You're defending trespassing with vibes?" It got a chuckle from the gallery. Then came the fun part, cross-examination. Nora took the stand with all the poise of a villain giving their monologue too early. She claimed she was acting in good faith based on verbal understandings between her board and the late Roy Walton. "Do you have any written proof of such an agreement?" Gina asked. "No, but the community knew." "That's not an answer. Yes or no?" Nora hesitated. "No." "Did you verify with the county assessor whether the property was part of the HOA?" "We believed." "Yes or no, Miss Page?" She bit her lip. "No." Then Gina introduced the bombshell, the forensic analysis of the so-called access document Nora had mailed me. It was a fake, typed using a font that didn't exist until 2 years after my uncle died. The signature didn't match any in public records. And the person listed as Vice Chair of Access Enforcement. Completely fictional, never registered, never voted in, never even a resident. Nora's lawyer scrambled, claimed it was a clerical error, claimed Nora had relied on information from others, claimed, well, everything short of aliens. When my turn came, I kept it simple. I told the truth, that the cabin had been in my family for decades, that I rebuilt it with my own hands, that I'd done everything legally, and that I wasn't about to let a suburban cartel throw a picnic on my living room rug. After lunch, the judge returned with his decision. The court ruled Nora Page had acted with willful disregard for legal property rights. The Maple Ridge HOA had falsely asserted jurisdiction over non-member private land. All claims against me were dismissed with prejudice. HOA was ordered to pay for property damage, legal fees, and emotional distress, totaling $275,000. Then came the kicker. Judge Redmond turned to Nora. "Ms. Page, you submitted fabricated documents to this court. You may expect a separate criminal inquiry into perjury and document fraud." Her face cracked for the first time all day. When the gavel came down, I expected Nora to explode. Instead, she just sat there, blinking, like someone had turned off her internal monologue and she was trying to reboot. Her attorney leaned in to whisper something, but she didn't move. It was the first time I'd seen her without that smug veneer. And I'll be honest, it was a damn satisfying silence. Outside the courthouse, a few local reporters were waiting. Gina handled them like a seasoned pro, giving a tight, pointed statement about the danger of overreach by unregulated HOA structures and the importance of protecting property rights in rural communities. I kept it simple when they asked me how I felt. I feel like I finally get to enjoy my own porch without checking the cameras every 10 minutes. We didn't celebrate that night. Not really. I drove back up to the cabin alone while my wife stayed in town with the kids a little longer, just to make sure everything stayed calm. The place was still. No flyers, no tire tracks, no weird noises. Just trees, wind, and water. 3 days later, I got a call from the sheriff's office. Turns out the county prosecutor had opened a criminal case against Nora. Submitting falsified documents in court? That's not just unethical, it's a felony. They served her at home. Word spread fast. Within a week, Nora officially resigned as president of the Maple Ridge HOA. Her letter, leaked online by someone on the board, was a masterpiece of self-pity. I was misled. I believed I was protecting community access. I was targeted by hostile forces. It read less like a resignation and more like the villain's monologue. At the end of a soap opera, the board held an emergency election. They replaced her with a retired librarian named Joseph Miller, a soft-spoken man with bifocals and an actual printed copy of the HOA charter marked with color-coded tabs. He emailed me personally to say he respected the outcome of the case and that the HOA would not assert any claim, imagined or otherwise, on my property ever again. Good call, Joe. As part of the court's order, the HOA had to pay for all damage to my cabin and land, including repairs to the gate, replacement of the cameras, cleanup of the yard, and even reseeding parts of the garden Nora's party trashed. The checks came fast. Too fast, actually. I got the impression they were throwing money just to make it all go away. But money wasn't what I wanted. What I really wanted was silence. And I finally got it. No more SUVs creeping past the gate. No more strangers on the dock. No more fake letters or bricks on the porch, just the creak of wood underfoot, the shimmer of lake water through the trees, and the sound of my kids laughing again when they came back to stay the weekend. For the first time in weeks, I didn't sleep with my phone next to the bed. I didn't need to. The new sign went up on a clear Saturday morning. I bolted it to a fresh cedar post just inside the gate. Thick letters, metal plate, clean black on silver, private property, not HOA land. Trespassers will be prosecuted simple, direct. No room for interpretation, especially not from suburban royalty with clipboards and barbecue dreams. I stepped back to admire it, sipping coffee from my battered thermos. Damn thing looked good. It had been nearly a month since the verdict, and peace held steady. No bricks, no cars, no whispered HOA threats wrapped in legalese. Just birds, water, wind, and the sound of my kids throwing pine cones at each other behind the cabin. We were finally able to live like the place was ours, because it was. The garden had bounced back faster than I expected. My wife replanted the herbs. I rebuilt the fire pit with stones we hauled up from the creek. The broken cameras were replaced with upgraded versions, solar-powered, night vision, cloud-backed. Not because I was still paranoid, but because I believed in being prepared. Once you've had a mob on your lawn, you never quite look at gravel the same way again. Bart came by with a rhubarb pie. Said it was a local tradition after legal reckonings. I wasn't sure if he was joking. His poker face is legendary. But I accepted it and invited him to stay for coffee. We sat on the porch and watched a loon glide across the lake like it owned the place. A few days later, a couple showed up, middle-aged, polite, nervous. They lived on the edge of Maple Ridge and had stayed quiet during the whole fiasco. Now, with Nora gone, they came to apologize. Said they'd believed what they were told about the land being shared. Said they felt stupid. I didn't rub it in. Just thanked them for the honesty and handed them a copy of the actual land survey. They left with sheepish smiles and a slice of rhubarb. Then came an email from Joseph Miller, the new HOA president. Short, respectful. He attached a PDF of the HOA's updated guidelines and added one line. We've amended our charter to reflect that your property is explicitly independent. We've also made it a training example. Thank you for reminding us what boundaries mean. I almost printed it out and framed it. By midsummer, things were quiet enough that we started inviting friends up again. No more second guessing. No more questions about who allowed us to be here. We grilled, swam, fished, let the kids camp out in the backyard. And every now and then, I'd walk down to the dock alone at night just to sit with the water and remember why I'd fought so hard for it. It wasn't just about property. It was about principle, about legacy, about not letting someone bulldoze your piece with a fake badge and a smile. That chapter's closed now. And the new one? It starts with a locked gate, a clean shoreline, and my family exactly where we're supposed to be.